best place, because I can remove my mask here. Okay. Dear colleagues, I'd like to thank you for attending this edition of the EHA Rotorcraft and VTOL Symposium. 2 years we had to wait to meet again physically for this important event. In the past 24 months, we all have become accustomed to using new communication technologies. For this helicopter pilot, who started his career almost 45 years ago in the US 269 in the US Army Training Center at Fort Rucker, and who will unfortunately celebrate his 66th birthday very soon, this has been a tremendous challenge. Therefore, I'm happy to meet you again face to face and use the old analog way of communication. So let's talk helicopters. What do I like most about this industry? Well, for one, there is the way all the primary stakeholders participate in its development. The OEMs, the operators, the service providers, the regulator, they are all in a continued process of enhancing our industry level of safety, efficiency, sustainability, to enable operators to provide better services to the society by inventing and certifying new technologies. Even 20 months in a pandemic haven't stopped our progress. Looking back on my career specifically, I asked myself, what's changed in helicopter operation in the past 45 years? In 1977, I was flying within the regulatory framework of the German Army on the good old Bell UH-1D. This single-engine helicopter started its duty in 1967 in the German Army, and it did its last flight on 23rd June 2021, after having been in operation for 54 years and 3 months. During my 5 years of flight duty on the UE, I enjoyed about 1,800 hours on this reliable aircraft, and almost 700 hours of which were conducted under instrument flight rules. Just to remind you, this was a single-engine helicopter equipped at that time with only one VHF radio, one UHF radio, which you couldn't use for communication with the civil air traffic control, one VOR, one ADF, and one ILS receiver and a transponder, but no autopilot. Nevertheless, all the flights were multi-pilot flights, and the crew members knew about what to do without having participated in an MCC or CRM course before. Beginning in '82, I transitioned from the military into the civil world and began to earn my living in civilian single-engine helicopters. My first civilian type rating was again on a Bell helicopter, but much smaller this time. It was a Bell 47, followed by a Bell 206 Jet Ranger later. But I had to give up my beloved IFR flying, because flying under IFR wasn't allowed in single-engine helicopters in civilian operations. So I asked myself, had it been unsafe to fly IFR on the UE? As I didn't want to lose my IFR capabilities, I continued to fly IFR in small single-engine fixed-wing aircraft, which was permitted. Later in my career, I got to fly the multi-engine MD-900-902 Explorer helicopter, which allowed me to activate my instrument rating in helicopters again. Why did I tell you this long story? Because if you look into the program of this year's EHA Rotorcraft and VTOL Symposium, you will find tomorrow at 10:20 a presentation given by Nigel Talbot from Leonardo Helicopters with the promising title CS-27 Helicopter Single Engine IFR Certification, a Safety Enhancement Opportunity. This sounds quite promising to me, like the title of the famous movie Back to the Future. But let me come back to my initial question. What's changed in helicopter operations in the past 45 years? Well, I'd say not too much with regard of types of operation. In other words, the types of services helicopter operators all over the world deliver to their societies. For example, today, as in the 70s, helicopters are supporting the oil and gas industry. Helicopters are serving within national healthcare systems by providing emergency medical services in certain areas by means of hoists or human external cargo. Helicopters patrol pipelines and power lines to ensure the security of our energy supplies. Helicopters perform aerial firefighting, a sector that unfortunately needs to grow more and more because of the climate change. Helicopters support construction and supplying infrastructure in remote areas such as the Alpines by transporting both external and internal cargo. Police operations use helicopters to support law enforcement. Helicopters conduct commercial air transport to facilitate fast, safe travel to remote areas as well as cities without the need to install expensive ground infrastructure. There are still some operators using helicopters for agricultural missions, although this business is shrinking due to the changes in environmental legislation. A fairly new growing branch of the industry is the support of offshore wind farms. So what has changed? It's the environment in which we are performing our daily tasks in helicopters. In particular, the legal environment has become more complex. As I said before, beginning '82, I left the world of the military aviation legal framework and stepped into the civil national aviation legal framework. The 90s saw a transition of the European Union from a national regulatory body to the joint aviation authorities and their joint aviation requirements, such as JARV 3, JIFCL 2, and JIFCL 3, just to name a few. Unfortunately, the intention to harmonize the aviation legal framework in Europe didn't materialize. As a result, in 2002, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency was founded and took over the tasks of the JAA. What does all this mean for helicopter operations, which in 89% of all cases in Europe are small operations with fewer than 5 helicopters? Operators are trying to stay in business by fulfilling the missions described above, while adapting their organization to the permanently changing legal requirements. In most cases, this has necessitated of hiring of more people to cover the growing administrative burden. But this additional burden doesn't create one additional sold flight hour. It just lets us, the operators, continue to do what we have done for decades. The overall goal, which is fully supported by all stakeholders, operators, OEMs, and the regulators alike, is to reduce the number of incidents, accidents, and fatalities in helicopter operations. Together with representatives of the rotorcraft industry and the national aviation authorities, EASA set up the Rotorcraft Safety Roadmap with the following strategic objectives: to improve overall rotorcraft safety by 50% through 2028. It's not so far away. To develop performance-based and proportionate solutions that help maintain the competitiveness, leadership, sustainability of the European helicopter industry. The key word here is proportionality, which we must not forget in development of new regulations. One example of where we still need to review proportionality regards the question of mandatory usage of FSTD for training and checking as required per Air Operation Regulation ORO FC 230 and the related AMCs and guidance material. We all agree that a large number of accidents happen during training. Indeed, EASA's Rotorcraft safety roadmap says a review of the most critical training scenarios should be performed if the risk for a particular failure situation is higher than the risk of suffering that failure in operation. Then that in-flight training scenarios should be reduced and the training should be conducted instead on simulators. It's my firm conviction that the use of qualified FSTDs reduces the risk of incidents and accidents in aircraft training flights, and that these devices can improve the quality of training. And as we can see on this show, fortunately, there are a lot of new developments now on the market concerning virtual reality simulation. Recently, I was made aware of a small German operator who operates an AS350, now H125, helicopter, and whose NAA is asking him to do OPCs and annual recurrent training sessions with his pilots by using an FSTD only. The operator operates 4 AS350B3 and presently has 7 pilots flying them. The company has flown this model for almost 40 years and has had no incident or accident during training and checking. The nearest simulator available to this operator is located in Helsinki. EASA's new Opinion 02/2021, All-Weather Operations and the Review of Crew Training Requirements, which was introduced by Eric Bennett in the pre-recording to this symposium, shows some significant simplifications regarding recurrent training and checking. However, the request to use FSTDs, even if only on an alternating basis between training and checking, puts extra financial and organizational burden to all operators, and especially to the small operators. Requiring our small German operator, this example, to use an FSTD on an alternating basis would triple the cost of his annual recurrent training and checking sessions, because the price per hour for the simulator is twice that of the hourly operational cost for his helicopter. Add to that the travel costs for the pilots and the instructor and examiner to travel to Helsinki, and the reduction in hours during which the pilots would not be available for the operation, and you have an expensive training proposition indeed. In considering proportionality, I guess a thorough risk assessment could reveal that for this operator, performing his training and checking and procedures entirely on the helicopter could provide the same level of safety and quality as doing them on a simulator. This statement may not be valid for all operators, nor for all helicopter types. Therefore, the Oversight Authority should determine whether to require the FSTD training on a case-by-case performance-based basis. To repeat it, I don't question the general usage and benefits of FSTD, especially not the usage of the new and modern ones. I only asked that the effort required to employ them be kept proportional to their benefits. Numerous regulatory changes that are included in Opinion 02/2021 are recent and beneficial to helicopter operations without being overly burdensome. They reduce the burdens. Luckily, the regulator has been listening to operator requests to participate in the rulemaking process, and is inviting interested parties to do so. Maybe I should repeat this point. The regulator is inviting stakeholders to participate in the rulemaking process. Please take advantage of this opportunity. Please contact us on the EHA booth and declare your availability to support us in some rulemaking tasks. As Eric Bennett explained in his video for the Opinion 02/2021, it will make the following possible. multi-pilot operations in single-pilot certified helicopters without the need of an ATPLH. And the hours will be credited for the ATPL hours. Creating line checks for the different helicopters. Establishing groups of type ratings for single-engine piston and single-engine turbine helicopters, which will allow cross-crediting of OPCs within these groups. And the opinion will also allow more than 3 type ratings per group, plus another multi-engine type rating as an example for commercial air transport. CRM in the non-operational environment tailored to the operation, and more flexibility in training and checking for commercial air transport and special operations. These are only a few examples of the regulatory changes and positive examples which will come active in 1 year. What else has changed for operations in the past 45 years besides regulation? Public acceptance, or should I say the lack of public acceptance. 50 years ago, when a helicopter landed somewhere in the field, people were curious and looked at it as an attraction. Today, helicopters are very often seen as means of transport for the wealthy only, and operators are overwhelmed by noise complaints. When an emergency medical service helicopter landed at an accident site in an urban environment during the first 20 to 30 years of such kind of operation, everybody was happy about and grateful for this life-saving tool, which delivered medical help to the people in need. Today, air medical pilots have to deal with complaints about noise and broken flower pots and garden chairs from people who simply do fail to see the value of the service the helicopter brings to the neighborhood. This decreasing level of public acceptance calls for a common campaign by all of us to make European citizens aware again of the valuable contributions the helicopter industry makes to their safety and security. New technologies have been developed in recent years that make helicopter operations safer, including engines that require less maintenance, less fuel, glass cockpits, new avionics featuring moving map systems, and warning systems like H-doors that provide improved situational awareness to the crew. More efficient rotor systems, better autopilots, you name it. In addition, safety improvements have been developed and certified for the existing fleet, retrofits, as well as such as crash-worthy fuel tank systems. And now I have to talk about what I saw today. At the Airbus booth, there is a crash-resistant fuel tank system available for retrofit. Unfortunately, the manufacturer has received quite a low response. There are about 2,600 AS350 flying in Europe with old fuel tanks. And for the sake of safety, they should be retrofitted. So the price is comparably low, talking about 35,000 euros for a new system. A system which can be installed, for example, in a 600-hour inspection. But what do all these new safety improvements have in common? The long and complicated certification process, which drives up costs and sometimes may even hinder manufacturers from embarking on new developments. I would like to encourage EASA to take a close look at the certification specifications and adapt them to enable faster and less expensive developments of new equipment that improves safety and reduces costs. Having said this, all this improvement come at cost, and not every operator can make the required investment. Here the operator needs to think about proportionality, or said another way, costs versus benefits. So taking the example of the crash-resistant fuel system again for the H125, investing 35,000 euros and you will get another voucher of 12,000 euros for additional free training. I think it's worth to think about it, to invest this money to increase the safety for your crews and for your passengers, to avoid post-crash fires. Now, let's have a look at the future. There's probably no one in the room who hasn't been involved in discussions recently about urban air mobility or advanced air mobility, eVTOLs, and unmanned aircraft systems. This new evolution of vertical air mobility will definitely change the vertical lift market, and operators need to be prepared to accommodate these changes. Most probably, new technology will need to be installed in existing fleets to enable us to participate in air traffic in certain airspaces defined by the U-Space regulatory framework. Iconspicity is the magic word here. My question to all stakeholders who will be driving this development forward: who will take the additional costs for the operators of the required adaptations and installations? I hope you have all seen the pre-recording about iconspicity and U-Space airspace from Vladimir Foltin. He is the PCM ATM expert in the EASA Certification Directorate. Take the opportunity while you are here at the show to talk to Vladimir about it. The EHA SME in iconspicity and Vice Chairman Thierry Gouderc is also available at our EHA booth to answer your questions and welcome your feedback. It's my firm conviction that these new tools will also open business opportunities to experienced helicopter operators. For who else has the experience to operate aircraft safely in the lower airspace in urban environments? Looking at the future, I can't close my speech, so we are coming to the end, without having talked about what concerns all of us: protecting our atmosphere. I won't play around with numbers and participate in the controversial discussions about what constitutes the exact contribution of aviation and specifically the VTOL sector to the total amount of CO2 emissions. I believe, however, that we can agree on the simple common statement that we all need to contribute to the reduction of these atmosphere-destroying emissions in all areas of our lives, including the operation of our air vehicles. Therefore, I am glad to follow the research projects and developments done by engine and airframe manufacturers, by fuel suppliers, and by operators who already participate in tests to use sustainable aviation fuels to make VTOL operations greener. We at EHA plan to participate in the new Renewable and Low Carbon Fuel Cell Value Chain Industrial Alliance, with a particular focus on aviation. This alliance will bring together all relevant stakeholders, including the fuel industrial value chain, the public authorities, the civil society, and financial institutions to work toward the objective of boosting the production, distribution, and use of sustainable fuels. The Alliance will support the goal of enabling greater availability and affordability of sustainable aviation fuels to accelerate the decarbonization of aviation. Do you remember what I said in the beginning of my speech about what I like most about our industry? It's the continual declared intention of all stakeholders in the VTOL industry to make every effort to develop the industry by improving its safety, efficiency, and sustainability to provide better services to our society. Let me close my speech by thanking the entire EASA team for the preparation of this year's EASA Rotorcraft and VTOL Symposium, and for making it a significant part of the European Rotors 2021. I wish you all a fruitful and constructive exchange of experiences, opinions, best practices, and hopefully a successful business dealings. Thank you very much for your attention.